friends are simps.
My channel is obviously the peak of professionalism, and so you might not realise this, but I actually find that this kind of talking head video quite difficult to shoot. It's taken me quite a long time to get semi-comfortable talking to the camera, and even now it isn't the most natural thing in the world for me. For a start, as a male from the west coast of Scotland, there's a whole load of cultural hang-ups about putting yourself out there, and this remains a constant battle. On top of that, I'm in the bad habit of overanalyzing what I'm saying and how I say it, to the extent that if I don't get the take right the very first time, then I often find myself stuck in this loop where I have to keep redoing things and record multiple shots until I get the perfect one, falling over my words and forgetting what I've already said as I go. Frustratingly, I've sometimes spent hours on a single video that should have been really simple to do, and as a result, making videos like this has kind of become a bit of a chore and not all that fun. Something that has probably contributed to my recent identity crisis about why the fuck I bother doing this. Having said that, last year or something, I uploaded a compilation of my various furious outtakes where I'm swearing after the 900th time I've tried to record a simple clip. And so if you want to revel in my misfortune and misery, you can go watch that. It's not monetized because I swear far too much in it, so it means nothing to me. Interestingly enough, I've not found that I experience this same difficulty when I'm talking to somebody else. So whether that's a live stream or a podcast or just a video where I'm in the room with somebody else, when it's more conversational, things are natural, they flow much more easily and there's less pressure, which seems kind of ironic and opposite to what you would expect, because a lot of people freeze up with live things and I don't really. Part of the reason for that, I think, is that with these videos, I know that I can go back and re-record things, and even though I'm wasting my own fucking time, once I get that idea in my head, it's kind of game over. Ultimately, as much as I like recording with other people, and I think it would be a cool dynamic, nobody else wants to record these fucking videos with me, so I'm stuck on my own like this. I have tried out all sorts of different techniques, by the way, to make things easier, but none of them have worked out all that well. The only time I really feel comfortable talking to the camera and able to express my thoughts clearly is if I'm able to write them out beforehand and then stick very closely to them as I go and as I'm recording. Part of the reason for this is because I'm actually a much better writer than I am a speaker, and I can articulate myself more easily that way. So if I'm able to separate out the different parts and engage my brain in advance by writing out the script, then things usually go much better. If I try and do that on the fly, especially with the pressure of the camera and knowing that I can go back and re-record things and, thinking about everything all at once, it just becomes a big girdle and it doesn't work out. One thing that I've experimented with in the past is to have my script or my notes on a laptop or in a notebook and keep them nearby and refer to them in between clips. But the problem with that has been that whenever I start speaking, I tend to forget what I've read even just 10 seconds ago, particularly if it's a big long paragraph, because as you can tell, I speak relatively quickly and I've got lots of thoughts to get out. And so that doesn't really help, and I can't constantly be looking down here if I'm, talking to the camera. It's just that it's not good for the video. Now, for my recent video about the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, which by the way, you should go and watch if you haven't already, it's a masterpiece. I sat down in advance and I wrote out the script. I recorded the voiceover separately and then I chopped it up later and arranged it to fit in with the footage that I had. Now, I was able to do this because I wasn't sitting speaking to the camera, but I found that the freedom of doing it that way and not having to worry about where my eyes were was so much better, because I could just focus on what I was trying to say, focus on, reading the script that I had sat and thought quite carefully about. And so the delivery was also much more natural as a result. This got me thinking again about ways that I could incorporate some of what I liked about recording that way into my other videos where I would sit and talk to the camera like this. Now, one idea I had was to get a field monitor where I could basically connect a screen up to my camera's hot shoe, have my script on it up here, and then I could read it more naturally whilst also basically looking at the camera lens. Now, I was about to pull the trigger on one from Newer or something like that, I think the company was. It was about £100 or something, but I realised that it actually wasn't going to be all that great a solution. These screens are designed, I think, to act as a live display for people that are doing video out and about. Maybe if you don't have a flip screen, you could buy one of them, or maybe you want a better quality screen, or you want to angle it a certain way, or whatever else. But because of that, they are designed to take an HDMI input from, the camera, so you can see what's on the camera as opposed to something else. Now, this wouldn't be a huge deal, but it would mean that I'd have to have my laptop somewhere with my notes on it plugged into that via HDMI. It was mini HDMI to make things worse, so just another added complication. And then I also realised that I was going to have to power this screen, and the screen would require batteries, and there were a particular type of batteries that would need their own charger, and that would be an extra cost. And if I wanted to power them over like a plug, it would have to be a 12-volt DC connection. It wasn't USB, so I couldn't just use a battery pack. And then if I did plug them in, I'd have to find a socket. It was just, it wasn't going to work out the way I wanted it to. In addition to this, I also discovered that because they've got like a thread mount adapter on there, I couldn't just slide it into my hot shoe. I would need some kind of connection. And the common ones that allowed you to tilt it and everything are these ball mounts, which mean that the screen was going to be much higher off of the camera than I wanted. So yeah, no fucking use. What I realised was that I've actually got a dedicated screen that would do the job perfectly, at least in theory. Specifically, I've got this old Amazon Kindle Fire tablet, which I bought specifically just to watch TV shows on the plane when I'm travelling for work and stuff like that. It doesn't have any HDMI connections or anything fancy about it whatsoever, but ultimately that's a good thing because all I want to do is display text. I don't really want to have to be tied up to my laptop, so I can just use this. So I found this relatively inexpensive aluminium tablet holder on Amazon, which I could then mount on top of my camera. This seemed like a great alternative to, buying the whole fucking monitor and everything else, but then I realised that I was still going to need the ball mount adapter thing, and it was going to sit too high up, which wasn't going to be ideal if I was trying to talk to the camera naturally. However, I discovered that the particular tablet holder that I had found had what's known as a Swiss Arca mount, which means that in theory, if I bought a small rig cage, then I would be able to just slide it on and I could have the tablet at a much lower and, more appropriate level. If you're not familiar with small rig cages, these are basically metal frames that clamp onto your camera and provide additional mounting points for different bits of gear. I went with the half cage because it was a bit cheaper, but also because it doesn't completely take over the whole camera body. At times I still want to use my Sony a7 IV as a regular camera without having this monstrous thing to carry about. So the half cage was a wee bit lighter, but still gave me some mounting options, including one for my Rode Wireless Go 2, which was essential. If I had bought the other field monitor and clipped it onto my hot shoe, then I wouldn't have anywhere to put my microphone, which wouldn't have been any good at all. So this seemed like a decent solution. In addition to that, I've also been playing about with the idea of recording more videos in places and scenarios where I would require to have a video light at the same time as my Wireless Go microphone. So again, I thought it was worth a punt. Installing the cage was actually a wee bit fiddlier than I had anticipated. There was no instructions in the box, which should have been fine, but you had to screw in the strap plug onto the cage as well as at the bottom on the tripod mount in order to make sure it was completely stable. And you had to do it in a certain order, and I took the lock out before I was meant to and fucked it up, so I had to take it all apart again and do it. But once it was all on there, it was fine. It was just tested my patience for a wee minute, and I'm not the most patient man in the world. Unfortunately, the rail on the bottom of the tablet holder, which as you might recall was one of the key features and reasons that I bought this thing, turned out to be too large for the slots in the small rig cage. So that was a wee bit of a problem. However, luckily in the box there was this wee adapter which allowed me to slide into the cold shoe and then screw in via thread mount the holder. So it worked okay. It wasn't quite what I wanted, but it's at a decent height, so I'm not going to get too hung up on it. This video is the first time I've tried this particular setup out. Earlier on, I sat down and I wrote out my script in Notion along with the shots and B-roll that I wanted to get, set up the camera with the Kindle Fire on top, and here we are. Unfortunately, I ran into some practical difficulties almost immediately because when I loaded up the Notion app on my Kindle Fire tablet, I realised that there is no way to increase the display size. And that was a bit of a problem because by default, the text is actually pretty difficult to read, particularly if you're a blind bastard like myself. Now, I did try using the accessibility settings to zoom in, but the minimum zoom distance is too far in the sense that it cuts off the sides of the text, which obviously is no use either. Now, I didn't think this would be all that big a deal because surely I could just copy all of my notes in a Google Doc, load that up, and then, hey presto, I'll just view it that way. But it's not that simple because this is an Amazon device, and so as a result of whatever technological bullshit, I can't actually load up Google Docs or Google Drive via an app. I have to use the web interface, which is a bit clunky, and it just suddenly, this easy solution began to get more and more complicated. I mean, all I want to do is display text on the fucking screen. On top of the technical complications, I'm not actually convinced that this solution is better than having my laptop by my side with notes that I refer back to. And the reason for that is that so far I am very self-conscious anytime I look up to read what's on the fucking screen. So I can't really have this as my script where I just read it because it's obvious I'm not looking at the camera. Or maybe it's not that obvious on recording, I've not seen it yet, but it feels quite obvious to me, so it's not quite what I wanted. Now, I thought I could move the tablet from up here and put it to the side of the camera, and that way the tablet would be right by the lens and my eyes would just be moving a wee tiny wee bit and you wouldn't be able to tell. But unfortunately, it gets complicated to mount on the side here. I need a different mounting bracket thing. I went and found one and I stuck the fucking iPad or whatever the fuck it is on the side. But then, of course, it blocks the wee flippy screen of the A7 IV, which isn't that big a deal. I don't have to see myself when I'm recording, really, even though I bought this camera so I could. But then the bigger problem is that I can't tell if the microphone has run out of batteries because I can't see the audio indicator. I don't know if, things are in focus. It's just, this is not what I anticipated at all. To be fair, it is still early days yet, and I think like anything, I just have to get used to it and find something that works. But I had hoped this would be a better solution. This is the third time I've recorded this video to try out different setups and everything, and I've just ended up sticking with it on top of the camera. I guess we'll see whether or not this has been a fucking waste of time. In total, I spent about £70 on the small rig cage and also the tablet holder, which is more money than I would like to spend on something like this, but it was about half the cost of getting the field monitor and is also more convenient. Ultimately, if this helps me stop doing multiple takes of videos all the time, then it'll be well worth the investment, although so far it hasn't really done that. But I'll give it time. I've got faith. I've got faith it'll get better. The problem is me. I'm sure the problem is me. If you're somebody that makes videos like this, I'd be really curious to hear what kind of approach you take. Whether you have simple notes, whether you have a full script, whether you've got it in a notebook, whether you've got a screen, whatever works for you. I would like to get ideas because I thought this would be the perfect solution, but so far it is not, and this is becoming a living nightmare, and I don't know why I'm putting myself through this fucking torture. For now, I'm giving up recording this, and if you see me just staring at the screen the whole time, then I actually don't care anymore because I've lost the will to go on. For now, fucking see you later.